Okay, so welcome to Skill Acquisition 101 with emphasis here on softball and baseball. So my name is Cody DMAC. By trade, I am a chiropractor, but within the last 7 years or so, 7, 8 years, I've kind of transitioned into teaching. So now I'm an associate professor at Parker University within the chiropractic program. So my job there is actually teaching students how to perform and coach exercises for their patients. But it's kind of evolved over the last 4 or 5 years into more teaching skills and skill acquisition. And so within the last 4 or 5 years, kind of outside of my standard job, I've been doing lots of continuing education for chiropractors, physical therapists, strength and conditioning specialists, personal trainers, sport coaches, specifically for skill acquisition, motor learning, in particular, multiplanar sports and multiplanar athletes and rotational athletes. So we're looking at obviously baseball and softball, but soccer, basketball, pretty much anything that involves cutting and or rotation. So so yeah, let's kind of dive into it. So some objectives here quickly as we're kind of moving forward with this. I want to try and keep this as like surface level information as possible. So the one thing I am going to do though is kind of probably challenge a little bit of what you maybe how you coach and how you teach skills to all types of athletes, not just novice or like little kids, but also even up into professionals. Because the information we're going to be providing to you today uh, is for a wide range of individuals. It's not just for one specific group. It's just going as you're going to see, it's going to be scaled given a particular context of who you're working with. So main objectives here for today is going to be one, how we're coaching, how should we coach, if you will, to transfer a skill. We're going to reframe how we teach the quote fundamentals. I know that fundamentals is kind of a very large thing in youth sports and those types of things. And we're going to kind of challenge that notion of how we teach that. Do we actually need to teach the fundamentals directly, or can we do something within practice to allow those quote fundamentals to actually kind of come out? We call that emerge, if you will. So, uh, is it okay or is it good to kind of coach for perfect technique or one perfect technique? We're going to challenge that notion today. We're going to talk about should we design a practice activity. In particular, this in the motor learning world, this is called representative design. I'm not going to kind of bombard you with a bunch of kind of crazy terms or anything like that. And if some of those do come up, I'm going to explain them as best as possible. So again, like I said, I want to try and keep this as surface level as possible. But how we design practice and how we structure practice task, if you will, is kind of important, especially if we're trying to, if we have limited time with our athletes. And then the big one here, another big one we're going to talk about is explicit instruction. So our verbal instruction that we're giving to our athletes, how do we get them to perform a skill or try and use a different strategy within that skill. There's so much research on this, and it's still explicit instruction, verbal cueing, and verbal instruction is still a big issue within sports today. Oddly enough, it's kind of crazy. And then how do we modify the activity or the task to kind of drive the change that we're looking for within our athletes here? So those are kind of the main objectives today, and hopefully I hit all of these here as we move through this talk. So the question I always start with the groups that I instruct within seminars and conferences and whatnot is I always ask the question, what is your motor learning approach? And quite often I'm kind of met with, well, I don't really know if I have one. You do have one. You just can't verbalize it, which is fine. You don't have to verbalize it. But I think one thing that we do need to take into account when we are teaching a skill, when we're coaching a sport, is how are we trying to get our athletes and the individuals we're working with to acquire these skills, meaning they're able to take these skills and be able to use them within the game, if you will. And so a lot of times some of the answers that I'll receive from this question is, well, we just keep repping it. Just keep doing the reps, keep repping it, repping, coaching, repping, changing what they're doing verbally, those things, right? That would be considered information processing is what they call it in the world of motor learning research. And that is by far the dominant approach, not necessarily the best approach. quite often that is the approach that a lot of people who are quote successful use, but I think it's just because it's called survivorship bias. So that is a real term, and it's a real thing in sports. For every person who's successful with something, there's over thousands of other ones who are not successful. So you have to kind of chalk it up to it's probably not the approach of how they're teaching the skill. It's probably some intangible things that that individual has, like communication styles. They're able to adapt to their communication to the individual in front of them. They're able to connect more. They're able to motivate more. So that's what I would kind of chalk those individuals up, their success, if you will, up to that. So I think we can take the things they do well, and now maybe we can match our skill acquisition coaching and try and match those things. And now I think we can have more people actually who are competing at a higher level. So we look here at motor performance versus motor learning. So let's talk about this. What this means, motor performance and motor learning. So motor means movement. Okay. Motor performance is something we want performance, high performance in the game, right? But when we're coaching today, we're talking specifically about practice. Okay. How do we get the skills that we're working on within practice to transfer over into the actual live game, if you will? Motor performance is different than motor learning within the practice concept. Okay. Motor performance was what you and I and everybody else has been kind of raised on, if you will, within sports. It's trying to perform well. Okay. Now, just because you perform something well uh, does not mean that you're able to use that in the game. Okay. So the definition of motor performance would be the acquisition of the ability to carry out a skill. Okay. What motor learning is actually not just the acquisition, but it's also the retention of that skill. So when we coach for motor performance, what we're doing is we're trying to get the individual to try and do a skill in a particular way. And once they're doing it well in practice, we assume that they're going to do that in the game. And if you have experience coaching, that is not the case, right? There's no transfer of that skill over to the game most of the time, large amount of the time. So there was no actual learning that happened. I'm here to tell you that's not the athlete's fault. That's the actual coach's fault, but it's how the coaches are performing that skill, or excuse me, how they're trying to coach that skill, how they're trying to get that athlete to acquire that skill. Okay. So we can change what we're doing, how we're communicating with our athletes in a way that will move from motor performance over to motor learning. And that's what we want. We want to shift people away from motor performance and actually have motor learning. Unfortunately, what that means is that in order for motor learning to happen, practice looks a little shaky, right? It doesn't look terrible. It's not garbage or anything like that. It's just not perfect, which is okay. So there's an old phrase, perfect practice makes perfect, and it's total hogwash. This is not true. Said by some greats, but it's not true. Persistent practice creates learning, okay? So when we look here, pedagogy just means learning essentially, right? So we look at the traditional approach versus a contemporary approach to learning a skill. Okay. Your traditional approach would be like it's based on kind of like an ideal technique and or a form that we're trying to get our athletes to do and achieve, right? But our contemporary approach, what I'm going to try and get you to shift away from traditional and shift more towards a contemporary approach, okay, is going to challenge that. So traditional, again, based on an ideal technique or form, I want my athlete to have this particular elbow position when they're doing X task. I want them to have a particular form when they're kind of like attacking a ground ball and they're fielding and they're pulling it in. They have to be very specific and pull it in the same way every single time. They have to set their body up the same way every single time before they throw. That would be traditional, right? So they do quite often you see a lot of this, you'll see rep with repetition. So you're trying to achieve the outcome by repeating the same exact technique. So that's a traditional approach here. Then again, I'm going to try and get you to shift away from a little bit. Focus on memorization. So you're trying to like groove patterns or groove specific in neurology, they call it engrams, where it's just basically a movement pattern that you're able to reproduce. That it's been proven that it doesn't exist actually. So we're not trying to memorize patterns here, but that's what the traditional approach does. Okay. a lot of isolated and deconstructed drills, meaning that, okay, if I'm trying to work on a task, let's say hit a ball, okay? If I'm trying to increase, not just hit a ball, but I'm trying to increase launch angle. Okay, so I'm changing the angle of my bat to have an upward slope here to increase the launch angle, right? Which has been proven, that plus bat speed has been proven to basically get more hits and stuff. So a lot of times you'll deconstruct the swing of the bat by breaking it into parts, like kind of working on step. So step, boom, step, boom, step, boom, and then gradually building on top of that. That's what the traditional approach does, more isolated, deconstructed drills. Or like a fielding practice, for example, right? So if we're trying to get, if a team's struggling with a particular situation in baseball or softball, we look at the whole. Okay, what the traditional approach does was like, well, let me take out some information here. Let me make it simpler, not just simpler, but let me make it instead of hitting the ball, let me kind of, and the athlete's not knowing exactly where the ball is going to go. Let the person know, hey, it's coming to you, and I hit it to you, which it never really happens in the game. So whenever you take that information away, you always see the individual who's used to having their name called when the ball's hit to them, they freeze whenever the ball's kind of hit close to them. There's no information for them to actually attack, which is the issue. And then the traditional approach is focusing on fundamentals. Now, there's nothing wrong with like when we look at specific actions like throwing a baseball or a softball or hitting a baseball or softball or fielding a ball. There are things that we do want present when we're doing those, but they're not as many things as you would think, right? So the arm position, how we pull the ball in, our foot position, all that's going to change, right? In terms of like right and wrong, provided the particular context, because those things change in the game. Okay. So we see the traditional approach here. Okay, on the left here. Now we look at the contemporary approach here. This is the stuff that I'm going to kind of try and get you guys to shift towards, if you will, away from the traditional approach, because it has been proven to be more appropriate when it comes to learning a skill. Okay, so instead of an ideal technique here, we kind of consider a functional fit, right? So like if I'm trying to turn a double play and the shortstop feels the ball, instead of pulling it in here and then kind of like coming up and setting here, you look at middle infielders from the Dominican, they'll feel the ball and they don't even come out of the field here. They tap it and they're bent over tossing it, right? So from a functional fit standpoint, that approach, that form, quote form, is better, right? But that wouldn't be the ideal technique that would be taught. Does that make sense? So we look at yeah. So let's just kind of leave it at that. So just consider like, hey, there's no one perfect way to do a thing. We want them to be problem solvers without us having to tell them how to solve that problem. And we can create that through practice, how we structure practice, how we verbally coach practice. Okay. With a contemporary approach here, we're not looking to try and reproduce everything with the same repetition over and over and over again here. We want actually what's called rep without rep. So we want repetition without repetition. What that means is I want to be able to produce an outcome without trying to I want to be able to produce an outcome without using the same technique. Like I need to be able to reproduce the outcomes. So it's not that shouldn't be about the technique that I use or the form that I use to achieve it. It should be about, am I able to produce that outcome? Right. I can get a base hit if I get choked in here because now I can change my body position, change the path of the ball to make contact. Right. If I get fooled on a curveball, okay, I need to be able to adapt and kind of sling the bat out there to be able to make contact to put it in play. So we don't want repeatable technique per se, but we want repeatable outcomes. That should be the goal. And instead of memorization here, we want what's called attunement to the task and environment, which means the athlete is able to appreciate all the information around them, and that's going to help drive their actions. Okay. So before, if somebody's on, let's say somebody's on second. Okay. And third baseman's sitting there thinking, okay, we got one out. ground ball to me. I got to check runner two, throw it first, to hold the runner off, given the context of the game, but before the play, that's fine, right? But once that play gets going, some of those things might change, right? And we want them to be able to adapt to those changing constraints, if you want to call constraints, those changing situations without having to think about it. We want them to be reactive and responsive, right? So we want them to appreciate more information within the environment. Instead of isolated, deconstructed drills, we need what's called embedded or coupled activities. So a great example is, we're working with currently working with my daughter's 6U practices, and some of their forms, if you will. I mean, there's six, so it doesn't matter like the form really, but like they're not quite sure what to do when the ball's hit to them if there's not a runner, right? So there's no incentive to field the ball and throw it to first fast if it's kind of like deconstructed within like we're gonna hit ground balls. But if there's a runner, that tells them, hey, I need to get this ball and get it to first base, right? So the action of hitting is and fielding is coupled with the runner going to first, instead of kind of deconstructing. If we would throw a ground ball, can you field it? Good. And then can you field it and throw it to first? Okay, good. Now can you field it and throw it to first with a runner? Good. Now can you field it? Are you going to field it with the pitcher, the other players in there? Like, so they, instead of stacking them here, we should, try and think about placing all of the, at least some of the moving parts. It doesn't have to be all of them, but some of the moving parts that's going to keep the information that's important to drive the action that we're trying to get them to achieve, right? And that's at the lowest level, but this is at the highest level too. This professional baseball uses this. This information actually comes from Robert Gray, who's a skill acquisition specialist with the Chicago Cubs. And he was a couple years ago, he was with the Boston Red Sox. So this stuff is at the highest level too. So it's not, you would think like the lowest level, like where, kind of where we're at with our 6U, if you will, versus all the way up to professional. You would think they would, it's different approaches. It's actually not. We use the same one. It's just scaled because of the individuals we're working with. And the big one here is allowing movements to emerge via context. Kind of what I just talked about there with the coupled activities. We need some of the information that is present in a game to be present in practice to let movements happen. Okay. So traditional versus nonlinear, and nonlinear is this contemporary approach. So it's not just a linear progression. What it is, it's nonlinear. Okay. And so when we look at nonlinear, this is kind of important here. Okay. So the traditional approach, it's a more of a convergent approach, right? So we start here and we have things that are considered inconsistent and incorrect. And then usually people trying to get to the objectives to get to one ideal way to do things. We're correct, repeatable mechanics. This is what you see all the time. This is what I was raised on. This is what probably all of you were raised on. Okay. But this has been proven time and time again to be an efficient way to teach a skill, not just to novices, but also to professionals. What we should do is we should take that contemporary nonlinear approach. So we have a starting point. So instead of converging on something, we should diverge. Okay. So we want a divergent solution here. So what we do though is we scale it, right? So instead of like making the task like kind of breaking it to pieces, we just limit how many solutions they have to like solve essentially, right? Excuse me. And we want to do what's called freezing degrees of freedom. DOF means degrees of freedom, right? So for example, like a great example would be like, softball. Typical when you get into like, obviously like when you get higher levels of softball, not just speeds coming here, but we're getting the full like rotation around here, right? So we change the task a little bit. And right now, like with 6U, we freeze degrees of freedom by just kind of tossing underhand, and there's no circular motion of the arm, right? So we just kind of change the task a little ever so slightly. It's similar information of the ball coming from underhand to the batter, right? But we freeze degrees of freedom. So we look at batters too. Let's say we're trying to teach hitting. They don't move a lot, right? Because they don't have enough ability to produce force. Okay, it's something called action capacity. They just don't have enough ability to produce force. Okay, as they get older, they start becoming stronger and they're able to produce more force, right? So they start to free degrees of freedom. So now we start getting repeatable results, but we have more functional variability. We're able to control more variability, right? How they feel the ball right now, or how they catch. When you first start learning how to catch, it's like right. But the better you get, like you can catch here, I can catch behind my back. You start like you have more variability within that, right? And so that's we shouldn't be trying to get them to catch it one way necessarily or hit it one way. We get them to control what they have now, and then what happens is they end up developing and discovering themselves new and quite often better solutions for the individual. So when we look at learning here, what people think learning is like is just a straight linear approach here, and it's not. Learning is really, really messy. It's all over the place. Okay. This is learning. This is it, right? So this would be coaching for motor performance, but coaching for motor learning, aka retention of the skill, meaning that the coach or the person instructing the skill does not have to be present for the movement to occur within the game. It looks like this. That's what learning is. And what linear pedagogy does, also known as the traditional approach, okay? This is what it does. Let's say we want to go to Bakersfield Park here, Flower Mound, Texas. All right. This is the destination. Okay. So, i.e., this is the kind of technique or the skill that we're trying to get people to acquire or strategy to use, right? I'm just going to use an analogy here. Okay. Let's say the destination's here. Okay. What the traditional approach does is it says, okay, player, 1 through, let's say there's 15 players on the team, players 1 through 15. We understand that you all live in Flower Mound, Texas, and you live at various points in Flower Mound, Texas. Okay. Some of you live south of the park. Some of you live north of the park. Some of you live, east, west, southeast, south. You get the idea, right? Some of you live really close. Some of you might even live literally 1 block away from this park. Some of you live 5, 6 miles away from this park. Okay. But what we're going to do here, this is what traditional approach does. We have a destination here. Although some of you live really close here, we're going to make everybody start in downtown Dallas. So everybody has to drive to downtown Dallas before they come to Bakersfield Park. And some people are like, well, I live down the street. Why would I go to downtown Dallas to come back to this park? Well, that's what linear pedagogy, that's what the traditional approach does, is it makes everybody start in the same position. And it doesn't consider the context of the individual. Some individuals are starting at a higher level from a skill standpoint than others, right? So that's what we're dealing with the team scenario. Not everybody's on the same level. And that's not bad. That's just the way it is, right? Some people are better at one skill, and this other person might be better at a different skill. So what we need to do is we need to scale those skills so we can pull both of them up, okay, and those individual skills, but also the ones they're good at, we need to make them better at that skill as well, because there's always room for improvement, right? And so that's what a contemporary approach does, is it considers the individual. Okay. It doesn't make everybody start at one point. It allows each individual, in this case here, to start from their home, either 5 miles or 6 miles away from the park or 1 block away from the park. Right. So that's what we need to consider when we're kind of coaching skills. And it's not just individualized things, but it's also group things as well. So this has been this call it the contemporary approach is what we'll call it. Right? It has a couple names, but I don't want to kind of, it's called ECHO-D. So it's ecological dynamics, ECHO-D, also known as a constraints-led approach. I don't want to overcomplicate it, but ECHO-D, what this does here is some studies here. ECHO-D, it's a baseball launch angle study, batting study here. We have an opposite field hitting study here, and in other sports as well. We look at volleyball attack here. When we use these strategies, a contemporary approach, we improve performance in game. So transfer, not in practice, but transfer of skill in the game. So we improve performance. We make individuals and athletes more adaptable. Okay. We don't want them to become adapted. We want them to be adaptable, because adapted means that they're able to do the thing at that one specific context. Adaptable means you can throw many different contexts at them, and they're able to change according to that context. That's what this does. What the traditional approach does, it makes people adapted to the one specific thing. Transfer of skill takes a lot longer, is a lot harder. The contemporary approach also, these studies show that people who were in the contemporary approach groups, they made better decisions whenever new scenarios within the game came up. So they never practiced scenarios ever within practice, and then when those novel situations came up within the game, they were able to execute and perform well when those situations came up. Okay. Some more studies here. Individuals who had this contemporary approach or within practice, as a soccer study here, they were more creative and they were able to come up with more individualized executions of, within the game, as well as they actually had another study here that showed greater autonomy and motivation to continue on with the sport and continue on learning and those things here, which is at the end of the day, like that's what we're doing in sports to begin with, is to create this long lasting, loving relationship of physical activity, and you build quality character and those things. And what happens is if people are jaded, and so happens quite a bit in youth sports, they're, maybe have a poor experience with something and they stop playing sports, right? And so then I don't want to give into the physical activity issue we have within America, but that's what happens, right? But when we use this nonlinear approach, also known as a contemporary approach, also known as ECHO-D, we have greater autonomy and motivation within the athletes. So that's great. So great study here, soccer study, but directly applies to like the general approach here. Okay. So this study here, I'm going to have some stuff up here so you can read along, but you don't have to really worry about the actual like ins and outs of the study here. I'm just going to kind of explain some stuff to you. There are two groups, okay? The test for both groups, the test was three groups, it's control group, but the two main groups I'm going to talk about, the test was dribbling around cones, okay? So like this is called the Dutch, is it the Dutch football? Yes, DFB. This is Dutch Football Bund. It's the German Football Association. So it's their test. Okay. So the test is dribbling, passing, and dribbling around cones, zigzagging, right? So very, very much a linear, traditional approach here. Okay. Well, they had a practice group that actually practiced dribbling around cones and practice passing with cones. And then they had a play group. The play group never did any of these drills. They never drilled the test. Okay. They played the sport, but the coach structured small sided games and small scrimmages. Okay. And would, through the practices. Okay. It wasn't just playing the game. They worked on specific things, but it was just really structured in a way that was kind of a small sided game, fun, and more like the game than just dribbling around cones. Because when you're playing soccer, cones just don't pop up in the middle of nowhere and you have to dribble around it, right? They're static. It just doesn't exist. Well, when they retested the original dribbling around the cones and passing to cones and stuff, the play group learned the quote fundamentals of dribbling around the cones and those things just as well as the practice group. So you can learn the fundamentals without practicing the fundamentals, is what this says. Okay. And it's not just, there's other studies on this too, but I'm not going to bore you here. But this is another one, same thing. Okay. So ECHO-D considers the context for which the skills used, right? And then allows for more adaptable and transferable skills. Okay. That's what we just kind of need to know about that. So when we compare linear versus a nonlinear, or linear would be the traditional approach, nonlinear would be that ECHO-D / contemporary approach. Okay. It's not just performance and skill acquisition. We also see a reduction in negative forces on these studies, some of these studies on knees. Okay. So like negative knee forces, so basically things that can create non-contact ACL injuries. Like we're seeing reductions in injury markers when practice is structured in a non-linear way or an ECHO-D way, which is absolutely crazy to think about. So are you saying like we could potentially reduce injury if we structure our practice like this? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I am saying that because what happens is the individuals, there is science that shows movement variability. So your ability to carry out task in multiple different ways, strategies. Okay. you have more variable movements instead of using the same technique over and over and over again. That has been shown to reduce injury. It reduces what's called fatigue. Okay, and so you start to use other tissues. Okay, so that's what this does. This makes individuals, this approach, this nonlinear approach makes individuals start to utilize other strategies. Okay, they're more creative. So tissues, soft tissues that are at risk for injury, in particular, female ACLs. Okay, um, you start to see reduction in those negative forces. I'm not going to go into the forces here, but if you want to talk about them later, just reach out to me an email, but we can talk. So, okay. So more proof here of why we don't need to be repeatable with our techniques here. So, Nikolai Bernstein in 1922 was given the task, and this was in Soviet Russia, the Soviet Union. He was given the task to discover how come novice blacksmiths, so like the newer blacksmiths, were so inefficient at producing products, essentially, and why were the experienced blacksmiths really good at making reproducible products, essentially, right? So what you would think is that, oh, well, the experienced blacksmith do the exact same thing over and over and over and over again. Well, what they found was is that the novice blacksmith, their form was actually more consistent. So they were almost trying to do the same thing with their arms and with their hammers every single time. But what was happening was they couldn't control it well. So they were hitting the target at various points. But when they looked at the blacksmith, every time the experienced blacksmith, that is, excuse me, every time they hit the spot every single time. But when they mapped out what direction did the arm go, what arc did the hammer and the arm take, the experienced blacksmith had a different movement every single time. But when it got closer to striking, all that motion coupled into the exact same point here. So they're able to reproduce the outcome without reproducing the technique. And we see this all the time in every sport ever. Okay. You look at any professional, anybody. Okay. They are able to have reproducible outcomes quite often, but they use completely different techniques every single time. To the naked eye, it might look a lot the same, but there is variability there. They're different every time. Something's different every single time. It is. It's just that they control their variability better, right? When we look at youth sports, right? They can't control the variability. Now, that doesn't mean that we need to get them to use one strategy. What we need to get them to do is we need to get them to start exploring that variability so they can start controlling that variability. So another study here, this was done on potters. So they had, I think it was seven French potters and 6 Indian potters. Okay. And all of them were given the task of creating like this bowl, right? What they found was all 13 of them actually and when they filmed them, they measured the movements of their hands. They all took different routes to get there, but they all made the same exact product at the end. All of them, right? Now, there was bias between the French and the Indians. So the Indian potters, they made the same, they took similar strategies, and the French took the similar strategies too. But even within those groups, they were different from each other, which just means that we all take different routes to get to meet our desired goal, right? But our culture also drives a lot of these too. For example, this is why you see like within even baseball, you see the difference in like how Dominican Republic is developing baseball players versus how America is developing baseball players. America is like you never play the game. I'm not saying this is correct. Actually, I'm saying this is kind of the problem, is that you never play the game without a uniform on now, right? Which when we were growing up, we were playing all kinds of different variations of the game of baseball. You look at Dominican, like it's games, it's fun. They create games to allow, and they make it fun to allow those movements to kind of come out and emerge, and that's why they're so creative on the baseball field. So okay, so let's talk about now verbal coaching. So like if I'm trying to change how somebody's performing a skill, right? If I'm the batting coach, if I'm the fielding coach, pitching coach, whatever it is, okay? If I'm trying to get them to use a different strategy, the words we use are incredibly important, regardless of the level of performance, okay? Regardless if they are literally day one playing baseball or softball, or year 40 playing baseball or softball. It doesn't matter. The words we use are incredibly important. Okay. So when we look at this here, there's two forms of verbal instruction called explicit instruction. Okay. Two forms. Okay. One, we can use what's called an internal cue or an internal focus of attention. Okay. This is giving verbal cues that are directed towards body parts, right? So I want you to pop your hips or spin your hips, rotate your hips, or I want you to, drive your hip or something like that, right? Um, External cues or external focus of attention are verbal cues that are directed towards the outcome of the movement or outside the body. Okay. So instead for like internal would be a body part like a hip, knee, elbow, those things. External cue would be belt buckle, uh, shoe or ground, right? Those things. Okay. Um, so instead of saying something like if you're trying to get people to rotate, okay, and whatever, one, we probably shouldn't be coaching that skill particularly because it depends on where the person's at, because they don't really even verbal instruction, like sometimes the words we use, the context doesn't make sense for that individual. Okay. So the younger the person is, the harder it is for them to understand information. Um, so we kind of get creative with some of these things. Okay. We create analogies like a great analogy was, you know, to get the arm in the arm slot, the throw be kind of like you're pulling that bow back. Um, but sometimes when we give cues too, like an analogy like that, which is analogies fall under external cues and focus of attention, by the way. When we give analogies like that, we still need to make sure that that analogy makes sense for the individual, because sometimes people have never seen a bow and arrow before, right? So you might have to show them a video, or they've never felt what a bow and arrow feels like, right? But somebody who's felt what that feels like, that they would know, like, okay, that's what that feels like. That's the part I need to kind of get into, right? So what you always see is this type of verbal communication. You always see internal focus of attention, always directing people's attention to their body, telling them, do this with your knee, do this with your arm, do this with your chest or your shoulders or your hips, your feet. We need to move away from that, and we need to move towards external focus of attention and external cueing. Okay. That's why, like, you've always had somebody, if you remember from youth sports, you probably had a coach that was telling you things. You're like, I don't know what the heck you're trying to get me to focus on or what you want me to think about. And then it kind of like, you could tell they're getting a little frustrated and they're like, you know what? It's kind of like this. And they tell you an analogy, something very simple and easy to remember. And you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That was an external cue or focus of attention. We need to make things simple. We need to coach like a caveman, if you will. Okay. Less information is better. So when we look at an internal cue, and the research here, there's so much research on this stuff here. So this is not just my stuff here. I'm telling you information that I've learned from, the years I've been coaching, and then this is from the godmother herself, Gabrielle Wolf of verbal cueing here. This is all her information, okay, from early 1990s. Internal focused attention promotes motor performance. It's the kiss of death, essentially. So what happens is sometimes I tell the person what to do with their elbow. What do? They fix it. They do it with the elbow. Except the problem is this is like, it's kind of like putting cotton candy out in the rain. It's going to dissolve whenever there's pressure to it, i.e. the rain. Okay. What external focus of attention does is it promotes motor learning. And this is across the literature. It's constant, right? So this external focus of attention, not too much, enough to create the change. Okay. External focus of attention has been shown to promote motor learning a lot in a lot of studies. Okay. What internal focus of attention, so directing the cue or the athlete's focus to a body part, what that does is that increases what we call antagonist muscle activity. So the muscles that would be slowing you down to perform movement. And so it does slow movement down. So if I'm trying to coach an athlete in a task that requires speed or quickness or something like that, if I give them a focus of attention of that's or cue or instruction that is directed towards their body that makes them slower. That makes them slower. It does. It's been shown in the literature time and time again. But external cue or an analogy, okay, that gets people's thoughts out of their brain, okay, and it gets it into the environment, which is where we want in the first place. We have faster, more economical movement, okay. These two, the internal and the external focus, those two thoughts, when I give you a focus, I tell you to think about something, it takes different pathways within the brain, which is why these different actions occur here, okay. When we give internal focus attention, tell them what to do with their body, the athlete becomes reliant on the coach for the solution. You keep having to cue them that and keep having to tell them that. Which if the coach is not there, then they're not able to perform that. Again, they're not able to perform that task there's no transfer of skill. But if I use external cues, these make athletes more self-sustainable and adaptable. Remember, we don't want them to become adapted for high performance in practice. We want them to become adaptable in the game, i.e. learning, okay, retention, right? So PhD, Dr. Nick Winkelman, he has a great quote here. Okay. Sometimes coaching cues are seeds that need to grow. Other times they're fully grown trees ready to be planted. What that means is if I give them a good cue or a good focus, okay, let's say I'm working on a particular thing. I'm not a huge fan of the reason why I'm not a huge fan of hitting off tees per se is because there's no coupled motion of the ball coming in. Now, okay, maybe you can work on bat speed and those types of things with that. It's just a time to kind of unleash. Okay, I can see that a little bit. But if you're trying to get people to do that, let's say I'm trying to work on launch angle, hitting off a tee. I can set up the softball with the words or the baseball with the letters on the ball, tilt it up. And so I can give them a focus like, hey, I want you to launch this, launch these words up on an angle like that. And so they can start working on the actual launch angle of the bat, excuse me, for ball. And if it's not perfect, fine. I don't have to cue them again. Just let it. I'm going to water that seed. I'm going to let it emerge. Okay. I don't have to keep giving instruction or feedback every single repetition. I don't have to. Okay. Drop a cue in their ear. Okay. If they know what it means, right? If they don't, I'll talk about how do we actually demo those things. Okay. Drop a cue in their ear. Okay. And then watch it happen. Okay. Give it time. Let it cook, if you will. Let it cook. Right. So I equate verbal coaching and motor learning to kind of like cooking a brisket. Okay. I can use cues and focuses of attention that direct athletes to their body. So they think about their body, they think about turning their hips and those types of things. That would be analogous to taking a brisket and putting it in a pressure cooker and then cooking it in the pressure cooker. After about an hour and a half, you could eat it. I mean, it's edible, but I don't know why you would want to do that. Or I could that's motor performance, right? In practice. Or I can take a motor learning approach, also known as the Echo D approach, also known as using external cues, analogies, things that get the athlete out of their head and into the environment and focusing on the outcome of the movement. That would be analogous to smoking the brisket, right? So I show it the love it needs. Okay. I put that sucker on the smoker. I smoke it low and slow. Okay. And then I do my secret magic to it that I'm not going to tell you in here. The process is so much longer for the end product, but the product is so much better after that smoke as it is compared to that pressure cooker here on the left, right? So sometimes we have to be patient with things, and we literally what we do is we cause paralysis by analysis by giving them too many thoughts and too many things to focus on, when we should let the practice environment do the talking for us. Let them search those for those solutions. Okay. Now this one paper here shows you it's called a systematic review and a meta analysis. Okay, they looked at hundreds and hundreds of study. Okay, this study included the 143 studies that concluded this. So 143 studies that concluded this. An external focus of attention, also analogies, okay, is superior to an internal focus of attention, whether considering the testing of performance or learning, and regardless of age, health condition, and level of expertise. So it doesn't matter if we're working with day one athletes or year 40 athletes, external focus of attention, analogies are superior for learning and performance in a game. Okay. So when we use those cues, those focus of attention, okay, if we give an external cue or focus of attention, we have velocity can increase. I told you to move as faster, and it is. We can improve velocity. We can produce force production, so we can swing harder. Okay. Muscle endurance doesn't really it's a part of it, but not necessarily context here with like baseball, softball per se, and force production accuracy. So, i.e., throwing a baseball. If we have an external focus of attention of hitting the glove, right, we're able to produce more force more accurately than if we're thinking about our arm slot when we're throwing. Okay. Brett Bartholomew, pretty good book here called Conscious Coaching here. I love this quote here. Autonomy is the cornerstone of human motivation. So when we're coaching athletes here, we need to provide some type of autonomy. Okay. And when we do that, though, we give them a choice of something. Okay. And so when we give them a choice, we give somebody a choice of something, it makes them more interested in the action that they're getting ready to do. Now, if we know they need to practice two things, okay, that they struggle with, okay, then we can give them, and they have one thing they're really good at, we can give them option of three things. Say, hey, we're going to do these three things today, the thing, whatever task it is that you're good at, and these two things, it's these two other things. We don't tell them that they're good at one or bad at the other. We just tell them, hey, we're going to do these three things today, and we know one of them is something they like. We're going to do these three things today. What order would you like to do them in? So they have a choice of doing whatever order that is, right? And so whenever they go to do the task or the skill, practice the skill that they need to really work on, they're more into it because they're either know that they're getting ready to do something they love, okay, or they just had confidence built. If they actually chose to do something they're good at first, they have the confidence built from executing that task, right? So there's levels to this, right? There's levels to this. So we try and provide some type of autonomy within a practice session or anything like that to improve motivation. This is a big one here. I still struggle with this. When I learned this concept probably about 2 years ago, there's this concept called ironic errors. Okay. And what it is like when you tell somebody don't do X, they always do X. Don't think of pink elephants. And you're thinking about pink elephants, but just because I say don't, the brain doesn't understand don't. Okay. It just hears the thing, right? Don't push the button. You want to like, I don't want to push the button. Okay. Well, this is a real thing. Okay. So Rob Gray did a study here on baseball pitchers. So they gave, this is really popular in baseball, Major League Baseball, college baseball. I think high school baseball, some teams are starting to kind of do some of this stuff too. I'm sure it's there in softball as well. But they gave pitchers two zones, if you will. The one on the top, the pitchers on the top, they just got the cold zone. So the cold zone obviously is where the batter has the lowest batting average here. The group on the bottom here, the picture, the other group of pitchers got the cold and the hot zone. So what they were told was like, the cold zone group was like, hey, this is the cold zone. You got to hit the cold zone. The group that got both cold and hot, they say, hey, this is the cold zone. You need to hit the cold zone, but this is the hot zone. Don't hit the hot zone. And what he found was the group that got the hot zone almost purposely threw it to the hot zone every single time. It's called ironic errors. So when we tell somebody, hey, don't drop your elbow, they almost every time drop their elbow. Hey, don't do that. We have to stop saying don't do X and just tell them what we want them to do or tell them what we want them to focus on. Just tell them to do the thing. Less information is better. Less is better. Okay. Okay. So some things here that we consider when we're overcoaching. Okay. I would consider overcoaching. When you can try and consider this, and this is a process, a learning process here. Okay. So some things here, coaching and providing instruction while the action is being performed, right? So if I'm If I'm coaching, I'm at a level where we're doing like full infield, let's say, and we're not, obviously we're not saying anything where the ball's coming or anything like that. And but we're doing situational things. So maybe I have a runner in second, or maybe I have a runner on first and third, uh, and I hit the ball. See how they react, see how they respond. Don't provide instruction in the middle of the ball, in the middle of the ball, like rolling to shortstop, right? Or rolling to third base. Just see what happens. Let the movement happen. Now, this is why we do the situations in practice, because if we don't get the result that we want to, afterwards we can kind of we can give feedback on that, right? And like, so let's use that example. So let's say I have a runner on first. I'm practicing on situational defense here. Runner on first and third, and I hit a ground ball to third baseman, and it puts the third baseman in kind of like a little a funky scenario, just where the ball is hit and how they feel it. And maybe the runner on first is really fast too, and the runner on third is kind of clever. And let's say we kind of mess it up, so everybody's safe, don't even get them out. Okay. And instead of telling the athlete, hey, you need to do this, let them come up with the solution. Hey, you saw what happened. What do you think would be a better way to execute that next time? And then you let them verbalize what they think. We don't interrupt them. We don't let them, we don't let them cut them off or anything like that. We let them work through the problem, because if they solve the problem themselves, it sticks better. They're coming up with the solution. We're not verbally telling them, right? Now, if they're stuck, they're like, I don't know. Don't tell them what to do. Still direct their attention to the information sources, right? So maybe they didn't see some of the things happen. So, okay, you ask them, say, hey, it didn't work out. What would maybe be, considering all the things that happen, what would be a better way to execute that next time if this happens? And if they're stuck, they can't tell you and they can't walk you through it. They're stuck. Say, okay, well, what I want you to do here is I want you to look at where the runners are now, right? Um, this person did this person did that. Okay. Considering that information, what should you do? So you try and you give them a little bit more information, but you let them try and come up with a solution, right? Instead of just jumping to it and just saying, hey, you got to do this. No, let them come up with a solution, because that makes it more robust. It makes it more resilient. It actually sticks better in that individual. Okay. When we tell coaching athletes here, we should never tell the athletes what they did wrong, right? Oh, you dropped your elbow. Don't tell them what to do. Just tell them, if it's something important, okay, and it's time to give them another cue, give them a cue to change it, right? Whatever you think, okay, whatever, an analogy to change it, or point the bat a little bit higher, whatever, okay. Um, Tell them how to change it, okay, or what to do about it. Don't tell them what they did wrong, because when they start, you tell them, because a lot of times they don't know they did anything wrong. They don't know what they did wrong. And if you say, hey, you did this with your leg, or you did this with your hips, now they're thinking about their body, which you already know. You don't want to be thinking about your body when you're performing a task or a skill. We provide too much information before performing an action or before performing a drill. Okay, here's the deal. This is across the board here a little bit. If we are performing a task, or we all call it a drill, right? I want to shift away from the term drill, because drill means just like you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, which we know that we probably don't want to do that anymore. When we're performing a task here, if we can't keep the demonstration under 20 seconds, so 20 seconds, I would say probably tops. If we have to give more verbal instruction and coaching beyond 20 seconds, the task is too hard. We need to change something. We need to make it easier. Okay. Not like make it more deconstructed. We just need to change, decrease some of the variability, if you will, within the task. So I kind of like using like a 20-second, like a 20-second mark, essentially. Like if I have to give a verbal instruction about an activity that we're doing as a team, and it takes longer than 20 seconds, it's probably a little bit too difficult for the level I'm working with. Okay. Concurrent feedback. I kind of like talked about that already. We don't want to, as they're doing the thing, we don't want to be telling them with that. So that's kind of double dare. Sorry about that. And then, failure to give autonomy. I like giving autonomy when to receive back, right? So if we're working on a particular skill, let's say like we're hitting, okay, and we're trying to make a change on something, okay, whatever it is, I give them like, hey, I try and create the structure around the task, i.e. hitting the ball. and then let the movement kind of happen on its own after repetitions, right? After they're practicing. And I'm not just letting them do it. I'm like structuring the task very specifically for that person, right? I'm changing maybe how they stand or changing how they hold, where they hold the bat and those things. Okay. Um, but I don't give them feedback every single time. I give them autonomy and let them, hey, I'm going to let you go here. If you want feedback, just let me know. So a lot of times what they'll do is when they perform a good rep, they'll actually ask for feedback. And then you can just tell them, hey, that was great. Just keep rolling. Okay. Deliberate practice. So if you don't know, Anders Ericsson passed away a few years ago. He coined the term deliberate practice. Basically, deliberate practice is you're practicing something that you really need to work on. The best in the world do this. The best in the world at things practice what they're not good at, and it's hard and it's not enjoyable, right? So deliberate practice is important. It is important, but how can we arrange the instead of just repetition of those things, how can we make the part that they don't enjoy, how can we make that enjoyable, right? So okay, this concept of representative design of a practice for skill transfer. Okay, a lot of words here, I'll just break it down to you here. Okay, basically what we need to be in place here is the information that is present in the game. We talked about this earlier. The information that's present in the game that drives decision making, okay, needs to be present in practice, right? It's called perception and action. What I perceive drives my action. So if I perceive certain things in my environment, it's going to drive my action. Okay. Um, i.e., if you're a runner in second in baseball, let's say, and you take a lead and the ball's hit to your left, right? You you have a decision like I'm is it hit far enough to my left where I can go to third? If it's hit to my right, do I kind of come back here a little bit? So like the perception, the information you're perceiving here is going to drive the action, right? Okay. So an example of this here within practice design here. Okay. Um, Traditional, it kind of works on the parts. So work on the parts and we gradually add those parts together to get the whole. Well, I want to again, I want to challenge that here. What I would like to kind of propose here is we do start here and we do the whole, but it's simple. So do the whole simple, and then we gradually make it more complex, right? So if you think about it, like parts, the information that's always present in the game, almost all of it's never ever present in the parts. But if we make it whole simple, right? So we don't have to maybe hit whole infield, infield, outfield, so to speak. Maybe we could work on, a corner, right? Because maybe there's a very particular thing we want to do, but there still needs to be an element of variability within that ball coming off bat, communication between players, those types of things. Okay. So I think of it as like a cake, right? We don't, every practice, we don't have to eat the whole cake. We don't have to, right? This is the game. The game's the cake, right? But in practice, what we do is we might just have a slice of the cake. Okay. What that means is it's not the whole thing, but it's simple, right? But all the important ingredients for the cake to be delicious are present in that piece. They're not individualized ingredients. They're all together now, right? So this is Echo D. This is the contemporary approach. Okay. Practice doesn't have to be the whole thing, but a slice of the cake, it does. It sure does. Okay. We see this in bicycle riding here. So there's a group here that use training wheels and a group here that use the balance bike. 100% of kids who use a balance bike, they ended up riding independently on a conventional bicycle, but only 75% who used training wheels did that, because when you use a balance bike, the foot motion and the balance portions are always coupled together, just like when you ride a bicycle, balance and feet moving. Here, there's no balance piece, right? And so it's a nightmare to try and teach kids. So this is called task decomposition. Okay. This is called scaling. Okay. So this is not like riding a bike. It's not riding a bike, but it's kind of like riding a bike. This is kind of like riding a bike because you're pedaling, but it's not, because the huge component of that is so you're just working the pedal portion. You're not working task decomposition. You're not working on balancing. So we look here. This would be task decomposition, breaking things down into the parts, like we talked about. Like your traditional linear pedagogy, it's breaking things down into the ingredients. If I try and eat these ingredients by themselves, they're not all going to be very good. This is a slice of the cake. Okay. It's not the whole cake, but it's a slice of the cake. Okay. So we think scaling, right? So task simplification, right? This is what we'd want to do in Echo D. This is what we want. I'm trying to get you all to do here when we're coaching a skill. Task simplification, excuse me. That's scaling. So we look here. We have beautiful ballpark here, softball field in Oklahoma City. So maybe we're working on something here. Okay, maybe working on a smaller piece of the game, if you will. Okay, but all the important elements that keep that picture here. And that way, when I go to the game, okay, when there's more context, all the key elements for this picture to be present are still there because I just scaled it. So if you scale, the whole picture is still present. It's just smaller, right? I.e., whole cake, piece of cake. Okay. But we look at task decomposition, it's like cropping. Okay. It's like cropping an image. So once you crop an image, you can't get the original back anymore. Okay. It's done. Right. So that would be like working on a task here. So maybe I'm working on fielding ground balls. And then maybe I'm working on fielding pop flies. Then maybe I'm working on throwing the second base. Then maybe I'm working on, um, um, turning a double play. So like just small key components that maybe don't have runners, maybe we don't have context, maybe we're just doing things over and over and over and over again. So we go to try to put that together in a game, it doesn't necessarily fit together well. So there's no learning that occurs truly, right? This is motor learning. This would be motor performance. Maybe we get good at within that context, but there's no carryover to the task. Because when we try and string it together, it doesn't look very good because we can never zoom back out. We can never, because we lose it because we crop the image. Okay. So some Echo D key aspects. So the contemporary approach here. We always consider the individual we're working with. Everybody's different, right? The number, the N equals one thing is the N in a scientific study is the number of people involved in the study. With athletes, it's always N equals one. So we always try and scale the difficulty to the individual if we can, right? Even if we're doing the same, if you have like 3 shortstops and one is clearly your best shortstop, right? You can have them doing the same task, the same activity, but you can make it harder for that individual and you can scale it back a little bit for the others. Okay. Task environment, it guides the learner, right? We try and get them to be ingrained, or not ingrained, excuse me. We try and get them to take their attention, put it into the environment so we can have some guiding there. Try and promote autonomy, which I already kind of talked about, a way that might be able to do that. And we want to give direction feedback, not correction feedback. So that's kind of what I just talked about with when we're working first and third, runners in first and third, and maybe you hit it to third base and they kind of like they don't execute the way we'd like for them to. We give them direction feedback, like, okay, maybe you direct their attention to some information sources, not say, hey, you need to do this. Don't give them that correction. Give them the feedback give them feedback for like appreciating all the information, like, hey, where could you have gone with that, right? Okay. And understand like the environment and individual relationship is different for everybody, right? So the same boiling water that hardens an egg softens a potato. So sometimes a task may be really good for somebody, but it might be really difficult for another person. So we have to consider that too. Okay. Okay. Wrapping up here. Thanks for sticking with me. Non-negotiable points here in coaching a skill. So for me, there's like, this is non-negotiable here. These are things that need to be present regardless of the level we're teaching at, either like novice, first year, day one, or professional Hall of Fame. Okay. It's non-negotiable. When we're demonstrating, okay, when we demonstrate something, we need to tell the athlete where to look on you when demonstrating the skill or activity, right? We need to direct their attention on exactly where you want their focus to be. Because if I'm teaching somebody a very particular movement, let's say in batting, but I need a demo, you can demo. Demonstration is great. Again, how we do that's important, which I'll talk about here in a second. If I don't say anything and I'm just doing a thing, and I never give them the area I want them to look at, then they're not gonna get all the information that I'm trying to get them to achieve. So especially a novice here, if I don't tell them, hey, I want you to watch the bat, the position the bat is in when I'm in this position, then they're gonna be watching me and looking at my eyes. They're not gonna see the information that I want them to. Okay. Um, Try and demonstrate in real time and real speed, not in slow motion. Okay. You would think that demonstrating in slow motion is better. It's not. It's not better. There's some research that shows it's not better. So we want to demonstrate in real time and real speed if we can. Okay. When we're demonstrating an activity, like we talked about, keep it under 20 seconds. Less talking, less information. The less, the better. Keep it low. Don't It's the curse of knowledge. Don't word vomit to the individual. Okay. We want to give one external focus of attention or analogy when practicing a skill, i.e., batting practice. Okay. And then just one, and then let it cook. Let them cook. All right. We want to modify the task instead of using explicit instruction if possible, batting practice. So instead of saying, hey, I want you to snap the hips or rotate the hips, we can do a drill or a task called hook 'em. So where you kind of hook the feet a little bit and then you step through and then they move the front foot in front. And then what that does is it gets them to shift weight onto the front leg and you start creating the rotation at the hips. So you get separation between the pelvis and the hips. It's a popular exercise that's used in Major League Baseball. So not being perfect in practice is a good thing. So again, if they're perfect in practice, then that means the challenge is not hard enough for that individual to grow. So we've all played with people who are like maybe all Americans, air quotes, in practice, but when they get to the game, they were like it was like, who are you? How come you're not good anymore? That's because it's not that individual's fault. It's actually the coach's fault. They didn't challenge the individual enough to create learning. So, yeah. And then lastly, here, use context that is present in the game to drive the skill development in practice, right? So we want to try and create situations in practice that's going to help the athletes make decisions in the game. Okay. That's it. Thanks, guys. Please reach out if you have any questions here. It's my email there at the bottom. But thank you.